mission statement, the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus project and pursue causes or persons supportive of social, economic, and the political advancement of Black women worldwide. So we'd like to thank you again for getting your computer together. We have Tom Abinanti. He's a member of Yonkers, and he's coming from the 92nd District, which includes most of the town of Greenburgh, the town of Mount Pleasant, and part of Northwest Yonkers. One of his claims is that he has expanded absentee and early voting. He has co-sponsored the John L. Lewis Voting Rights Act, and he has fought for and was the first chair of the new Assembly Committee on People with Disabilities. He has provided leadership and legislator on meeting the needs of those with disabilities, and he states there are numerous ways New York is failing people with disabilities, and he wants to share how to fix that. Can you give us a little bit more about yourself, Mr. Abinanti?
Sure. Let me just say, first of all, thank you for giving me a chance to meet with all of you this evening. I am running for the Assembly again. I served 12 years as a New York State Assembly member. I'm running again because the people of Greenburgh, Mount Pleasant, and Northwest Yonkers deserve a representative in Albany who they can trust to protect them and produce the results that they need to make our community a better place to live. I'm a leader, not just a follower. I produce results, not just rhetoric. For Greenburgh, the primary issue is about whether the people of Greenburgh will see a huge tax increase and service cuts, or whether their next Assembly member will fight to reverse the special carve-out that my opponent, Ms. Shimsky, the incumbent, included in a new law that she sponsored that lets the wealthy enclave of Edgemont continue its efforts to form its own separate village. That law reformed New York's village incorporation process, which I was trying to do when I was in Albany, and immediately shut down 2 other incorporation attempts further north. But it let the Edgemont activists continue to go forward. There's also some regional damage as a result of that. Fewer Greenburgh police, highway workers, recreation facilities means a slower mutual aid response, deteriorating roads that we all drive on, and kids just hanging out with nothing to do. For Yonkers, this primary is about whether the Assembly member from the 92nd District will be fighting alongside of the other members for sufficient education aid for a school system that faces major challenges. And my opponent voted to cut the governor's proposed increase for Yonkers school aid by 32%. For Mount Pleasant, which is another part of the district, this primary is about whether their Assembly member will direct state resources to meet the needs of our neighborhoods, like Senator Peter Harcum and I did with the Sawmill River reconstruction. We need to save Pecanico Lake, which is an important environmental feature up in Mount Pleasant. So this is a big district with a lot of different needs, and it needs someone who understands all of the different parts of the district. Also, there are people with disabilities in this state who desperately need an advocate in Albany. As the chair of the Assembly Committee on People with Disabilities, I made people with special needs a priority, and they've been neglected ever since. So, I mean, that's an outline of what the issues are as I see them right now. I have lots of other things that I'd like to see us do. I know the cost of living is very expensive right now. When I was in Albany, I actually took some action to do something about it. I made sure that we reduced increased the ceiling for senior citizens to get the ceiling on income to be able to qualify for reduced taxes, real property taxes. I passed legislation that requires our supermarkets to make surplus foods available to food banks. I also was part of the effort to institute the circuit breaker process. That was Sandy Galiff's bill, and I was one of the co-sponsors and fought very hard for it. The circuit breaker allows people who own real property and have a lower income to get a rebate on their income taxes. So right at the moment, the cost of living is hurting people, and we have to come up with imaginative ways to be helpful, to hold down taxes, and to see what we can do about reducing the cost of living for so many people. I did something for Greenburgh and Mount Pleasant, which Yonkers already had, which was to allow the two towns to collect a hotel occupancy tax, a fee on a room fee, which is basically paid by out-of-towners. And for Greenburgh, that brought in like $1 million a year to hold down the cost of the property taxes. Yonkers already had that, and it was only fair that we do that for Greenburgh and Mount Pleasant. The biggest issue in Greenburgh right now is this whole issue of incorporation. It is if Edgemont, the wealthy section of town, is allowed to leave, then people of the middle class and the poorer section of Greenburgh is definitely going to suffer. Well, I was a town councilman. We built a very nice recreation system. We provided very good services, and they've gotten even better since I have left. And I would hate to see that system fall apart. First, the kids will suffer very badly, and our middle class and poorer residents of Greenburgh will see their taxes skyrocket and their services just decrease. I can keep on going, but I think you told me it was about 3 minutes. I guess I've used up about 3 minutes, so I'll stop at this point.
Well, it seems like you've already answered one of our questions. You shared some of the new initiatives. You talked about some of the old initiatives. I want to ask you, what would you advocate for that directly impacts Black women in your district?
Well, first of all, I think Black women, like women elsewhere, like all women, are very concerned about healthcare. I am pro-choice. I'm pro-healthcare. I supported when I was in the Assembly, I was a co-sponsor of the New York Health Act, which would, I believe, make sure that everybody gets healthcare. And I am very well aware of the surveys that show that Black women are discriminated against when they go for healthcare. Their pain and suffering is not acknowledged. I've heard this over and over again. I mean, there's a famous story of a woman who was a doctor and went in for some treatments, and she saw that she was being treated very differently than the white women who were there. So I think equality is very important, and that goes down to training of doctors and a cultural sensitivity that has to be instilled in the doctors and all of the medical staff. So that's one thing I would see. Secondly, I think that we need to look at ways of building and preserving family wealth. And that's something that the Black community has had difficulty doing. There are some people who are fortunate enough to have ancestors who are able to buy a house or establish a business, but it seems to be very difficult for Black families to accumulate wealth and be able to pass it on to the next generation. That's basically what this issue in Greenburgh is all about. Who's getting hurt the most? It is the Black community, the people of color who are in the middle class or the poorer section of town. If you take a look at Edgemont, there is really there are no people of color. They say that there's an integrated community. Well, they do have an Asian population, but there's no Black population. There is no Hispanic population. And so this is really just going to be a segregation. It might very well violate the voting rights law that we passed, but that's an issue for another time. We want to try to make sure that Edgemont does not get to leave and form its own village. But like I said, I think equal treatment for healthcare and an opportunity to build family wealth are two of the big issues that I see. I know there's a whole discussion about maternal, what's the words I'm looking for? Giving birth, maternal health care.
Yes.
But that's just part of the bigger issue that I'm talking about, where Black women don't seem to get the health care that they need, and their concerns when they express them are not taken seriously. And I think we've got to do something about that.
Well, we can't wait to see how you advocate more for us on the campaign trail. Thank you for that. We had another question. The Yonkers School District always seems to fall short of funding. And recently, the district lost 144 about employees. Losing one is horrific, but letting go 144, it really has been detrimental to the district. The aid and incentives for municipalities formula, AIM formula, is outdated. What is the cost of moving Yonkers or Westchester County to the same regional cost index as New York City? And how do we plan to address the AIM formula and ensure that our students receive the right amount of funding?
Look, this is an age-old problem. Yonkers is not getting what it needs. Um, I think a lot of the problem goes to the cost of living formula that you're talking about. But when I was in the legislature, somebody did do an analysis of that. And if we were to fix the cost of living formula, that would be part of the solution, but it's not the total solution. I think what we have in Yonkers is very similar to what we have in Greenburgh. You have a relatively wealthy community, which has more significant needs than its wealth can accommodate. And therefore, it needs to have special state assistance. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't want to be misquoted on that. But if you take a look at the total value of Yonkers, it is pretty high. The problem we have is that its needs are very high. Like in Greenburgh, for example, there are a lot of students that go out of district, and therefore they get penalized for that. And they're stuck with an age-old formula on how they get aid, building aid. And Yonkers has got similar types of problems. They're stuck with age-old formulas. They have a very, very significant challenge with the students that they have. Many of their students are special needs students who need a special assistance. I put a bill in that would require the state of New York to pay for all special needs students statewide. The state of New York should be paying for those special needs students. We wouldn't then have students jumping from place to place, suing the districts because they're not getting what they need. But that would relieve a significant burden. I'm the parent of a child with special needs. I was chair of the committee on people with disabilities, and I saw how all across the state there is uneven services. And it happens even from one school to another within a school district. So I think one of the things we can do is have the state pay for all special ed and not just give a lump sum, because a lump sum in Buffalo is worth a lot more money than a lump sum down here in Westchester County, the same amount of money. So we need them to pay for the service. Secondly, I think we have to have more of a concentration on providing services and money for high needs areas. We have a lot of people who are very high need at the southern end of our state. And a lot of them come into Yonkers. And I think that's the problem here. The other thing, of course, is, and I've said this to the mayors over and over again, I'm not afraid to say it, that when you come outside of Yonkers, 60%, 65% of your taxes go to the school district. That's not the case in Yonkers. And so as an assembly member, I represented Yonkers for a very short period of time when I first got elected, and then there was redistricting. But I represented Yonkers, and I said to the mayor at the time, I will fight for you, but you got to help me a little bit. You got to increase what Yonkers is putting into the school system as well, so that I can go back and say, look, in Hastings, 65% of the taxes go to the school district. In Yonkers, it's less than 50%, and I think it still is. So you got to come up a little bit. But at the same time, as I said, education is a state responsibility. The state should be paying for it. And down here is far more expensive than it is upstate. And so we need a lot more money. You can't just compare Yonkers to Buffalo and say, well, Yonkers gets more money than Buffalo or whatever. That doesn't work. No, you've got to meet the needs. You've got to right size the amount of money. I'm very disappointed that the governor was able to propose a $31 million increase. And then the state legislature, including my opponent, voted for a 21% increase. That's a 32% cut from what the governor proposed. To me, that is the first time I've ever heard of money that a governor proposes for a school district getting cut. And I've been around for a long time. I was a Greenburgh councilman. I was a county legislator. I worked as staff to the legislature, and I was an assemblyman for 12 years. That is outrageous. And I think that the delegation from Westchester County should have kept the 31% in there. I'm understanding that the mayor threatened to have layoffs, and that he's spoken to the majority leader and the speaker of the assembly and said, basically, the $21 million increase is not enough to prevent layoffs, and we've got to do something about that. And I'm hearing that they have been responsive and they're trying to work something out. It's not up to me to be able to release what's going to happen. because I don't know for sure what's going to happen, but I've got some indications. And I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to help Yonkers so we'll avert layoffs. But there was a meeting that I heard about, and I think the mayor invited people to that meeting. I have no documentation, but the rumor is that my opponent didn't even show up at the meeting with the mayor. And I think that's unacceptable.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You really have given us some insight. We thank you for your clear answers. We do have a few more questions that we'd like to submit to your office, and we would welcome your answers on these extra questions so that we may add them to our social media. We hope that's okay with you.
Sure it is.
Those,
I don't have a big staff at the moment. It's basically just me. And we're 10 days, how many, 8 days away from, well, what's it? Today is Monday, right? So it's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We are 8 days away from the election.
And we want to get all these answers out and share your point of view. We thank you once again, the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus Yonkers Chapter. Thanks you for joining us. We thank you for answering our questions. We wish you the best on the campaign trail. Good luck to you, and thank you again.
Do you want me to make a final comment, or we don't have time?
We don't have time, and you did just wonderful sharing all your points of view. You actually—
I just want to thank you. I just want to end by saying one area which I'm very concerned about is people with disabilities. Since I left the legislature, not one bill has passed that makes a difference in the lives of people with disabilities. They've passed several bills. They've all been setting up commissions or changing the names or the purpose of some committee or something like that. Not one bill addresses housing. Not one bill addresses more staff. Not one bill addresses how we're going to get people with disabilities employed. Thank you for letting me come and see you this evening.
Absolutely. Welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here with the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus. Welcome, Miss MaryJane Shimsky, the Honorable. Can you hear us? You are welcome.
I can hear you.
Very good. Thank you for unmuting yourself. I'd like to start off by sharing our mission statement here at the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus, Yonkers Chapter. The Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus project and pursue causes or persons supportive of social economics and the political advancement of Black women worldwide. So we welcome the Honorable MaryJane Shimsky, a lifelong environmentalist. MaryJane has fought for legislative agenda to fight climate change, also reducing the costs in governments. She advocated for alternative energy installations on county property, energy conservation measures, conversion of the county's bus and vehicle fleets to hybrid and electrical power, and there's so much more. She has also spent 7 years chairing committees with primary responsibility for the county's infrastructure. Would you like to take a minute to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Okay, I am just completing my first term as a member of the New York State Assembly. Before that, I was a county legislator for 11 years, and you went into some of my accomplishments while I was there. My main portfolio at that point was infrastructure, which includes flooding, fixing roads, bridges, wastewater treatment plants, and so on. And these issues have become much more important as climate change threatens our neighborhoods and threatens our infrastructure as well. I've been working to build a coalition to get more resources into fixing our roads. New York's roads are terrible, and our local roads are even worse. We need the MTA to pay more attention to the Hudson line. The Hudson line is subject to the occasional landslide, and by 2050, it is going to be flooding on a regular basis. Our sewers cannot handle all the storm water that they're getting from all the storms we're getting. We must do more with that. I was very proud to work on getting passed in the legislature this year the climate change superfund bill to get money from the oil companies to help pay for all of these things that we are going to have to get fixed. In terms of affordability, the New York Heat Act, which is critical to reduce greenhouse emissions, also will help provide subsidies to subsidize the cost of energy for low and moderate income households. We need more housing. We need more incentives outside of New York City in Westchester County. What I'm most excited about is expanding Mitchell-Lama housing for subsidized owner-occupied housing, which would help our working and middle classes an awful lot. We're funding childcare at a greater rate at this point. We do need to do more with that. We also need to make sure our education system is properly funded. Yonkers schools and many of the school districts in Westchester County have been chronically underfunded. There's going to be a study this year to update the state school aid formula. We need to keep an eye on that and make sure that Yonkers and our other cities in the county are being treated properly. In terms of human rights, reproductive health care, from abortion to dealing with the appalling rate of Black maternal health mortality as well as Black infant mortality. I am proud to work with a conference that has been doing an awful lot with that. The right not to get shot. Last week, the Supreme Court just made bump stocks legal again, which turns a regular rifle into a machine gun. We need to do more. We need to keep up in New York State with all of these issues, making sure that we keep our state residents as safe as possible when the Supreme Court goes offline again. We need to make sure that we keep voting as convenient as possible. We have done a lot to make sure that people can vote early and that people can vote by mail. We still, however, should do the constitutional amendments we need to make sure that absentee ballot by right is possible. These are just a few of the things I've been working on and that I'm looking forward to working on with my colleagues when we get back to Albany.
Well, thank you so much. You seem to touch a little bit about the Yonkers School District. So let me go back to that. Knowing that we seem to fall short in funding every year, recently the district lost almost 144 employees. Losing one is horrific. Letting go 144 has definitely been detrimental to the district. So the aid and incentives for municipalities formula, like you said, is outdated. What is the cost of moving Yonkers or Westchester County to the same regional cost index as New York City? And how do we plan to address the AIM formula? How do we ensure that our students do receive the right amount of funding?
Okay, this is the year for everyone to really focus on this because we are going to be getting changes in the school aid formula. And we need to make sure that those changes are beneficial to the city of Yonkers. The state delegation that represents Yonkers, which includes Majority Leader Andrea Stewart Cousins, includes Senate Education Chair Shelley Mayer, as well as Assembly members Pretlow and Sayeg and myself, have been advocates. We've managed to get millions in spin-up aid to make sure that the layoffs in Yonkers are kept to a minimum. It's my understanding, and at different moments in time, different people can hear different things, but it's my understanding that that Yonkers is not going to be facing layoffs. There are always the questions as to what happens to unfilled positions. I do agree that if we end up in a crisis situation every year that the legislature has to come in and fix, there has to be something wrong with the formula. And I think that that is the primary thing we have to look for this year.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that clarity. What do you think are the biggest issues that the Black community faces? And how do you plan to address these issues?
Well, we need to go back to Black maternal health is it's the marquee issue in a healthcare system whose racial inequities are often very real and cause a great deal of harm to people. We in the legislature, the last 2 years, have taken a lot of care to make doulas who are advocates for laboring and birthing women essentially available to more people and make them available to Black birthing mothers. Having that advocate is important, but I am also very concerned that this is an issue that permeates our entire healthcare system. And we need to figure out if there is more we could do with training healthcare professionals, or if there are other enforcement mechanisms that we need to do to help there. What often happens in Black communities is we know that there is a wealth disparity and an income disparity. So all of the affordability issues I was talking about before, housing, energy costs, childcare, making sure that the public schools are good so parents don't despair that they cannot afford private schools. All of these things are even more important in the Black community than they are in the community at large because of the economic disparities that studies have pointed out time and again. And that's why we really do have to redouble our efforts on them.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that clarity. How do you address negative criticism during your campaign? And are there any misconceptions about you that you wish to clarify or clear up?
Thank you very much for that question. This primary in particular has been a very bruising campaign. It's been a very nasty campaign. And the nastiness has spread permeated into other areas, but much of the nastiness concerns the issue of village incorporation, which does not directly affect Yonkers at all. So unless someone really wants me to talk about that in detail, I will just refer to it and say that I have been working with the Senate Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, cooperated with her on getting reform legislation passed to make incorporation efforts more difficult and more discerning. And I've taken some hits for that because politics is the art of the possible. And what you need to do is pass what you can to help people. There are people whose expectations concern issues that are more properly developed in a court system, in the judicial system, than they are in the legislature. There are also people who don't read who sponsors and co-sponsors legislations and just pontificates without the proper knowledge. That's been a problem which has now gone into other issues like elder parole, fair and timely parole. I have co-sponsored bills on those, and they are very, very important to many people in the Black community, as well as in the community at large. And I've now been accused of attempting to open the prison doors and let mass murderers loose. The person who's accusing me of that has, at least from time to time in his assembly career, also co-sponsored similar bills. I can talk to you about the relative merits of each, but in the context of this particular campaign, it's a matter of on some level, just who's being clear, who is telling the whole truth, as opposed to who is just trying to grandstand and score points. And I find that really disturbing, but it is what it is.
Thank you so very much. It seems like you're really speaking to some of the old laws and that directly impact our Black community, and that you would continue to advocate for. So you've also already answered some of our questions. So I'll end it by asking the age-old question and allow you to wrap up with what makes you the most qualified candidate. And you may answer it as you will, keeping in mind that the Black Women's Political Caucus thanks you so much for joining.
Thank you. Thank you to the caucus for hosting this interview. I really appreciate it. I think, number one, my priorities on the issues and my knowledge and my willingness to work on certain issues, whether they're public health concerns like Black maternal health, whether they are making sure that our children are vaccinated. That actually is always a significant issue in any race that my opponent is in, because he believes in ending all vaccine mandates. We also have the issues I talked about with how we do criminal justice reform. We've also had issues with rape is rape. And I'm very fortunate to be part of a legislature that passed it this year. I've also focused a lot on infrastructure issues, building coalitions to make sure that our roads and bridges get fixed properly, which our mass transit needs, because in Yonkers, our mass transit is buses, and buses go on roads. I think that, to close, I think the issue that I would most like to bring up with that is our substantive issues and where we want to go with them is obviously a critical part of this. What's also critical is how we plan to do it. I don't sit in front of my computer at 2 a.m. and just do proposed law, very few of which get passed. I believe, just as I do in coalitions and getting road funding, building coalitions with like-minded people in the legislature, in not-for-profit organizations, in our local governments, to get legislation crafted and passed that will help with these and the other issues that I care about. If done correctly, legislator is the most cooperative job there is. I cannot do anything in the assembly unless there are at least 75 other people who agree with me. I also need at least 32 people in the state Senate to agree with me, and I need a governor and the governor's mansion to agree with me. And it is important to build relationships and build coalitions on specific issues. You need someone with the human relations skills who can do that, or nothing will get done.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much again for joining us. We have quite a few other questions to share with you. We're hoping that we can submit them to your campaign and have you answer them. We'll be happy to post them on our social media. We're definitely interested in where you're going with the infrastructure, as Yonkers is growing in leaps and bounds, and something must be done. So once again, the Yonkers chapter of the Westchester Black Women's Political Caucus would like to thank you for joining us. We'd like to wish you good luck on your campaign trail. Best wishes to you, MaryJane.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward before and after the election on talking about these issues with you.
Thank you so much, Honorable Ms. Shimsky. Have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you.